joining our monthly webinar. Thank you for joining our monthly webinar. So we started these monthly webinars from March this year. So we meet every month and we pick a topic that is pertinent to leadership for women, a topic that is pertinent to leadership for women. We have a conversations and sometimes I'm doing the presentation like today. We also invite guests. So if you're here and you're really enjoying what we're sharing here, or you also want to add your voice to our conversations monthly, please do reach out to me if you want to be a guest on this conversation or on our webinar series on women leadership. So today we are focusing on a very important area or aspect of women leadership, right? So maybe just to introduce myself, Dr. Mavis Majura, I'm an adult development and leadership psychologist. I spend most of my days in different organizations, helping organizations to navigate the human dynamics so that they can become more productive and increase their own performance. So I do a lot of leadership coaching. I do a lot of team dynamics coaching. So I'm actually currently in Zebula in Polokwane, where I'm running a 2-day team building session, for a particular organization. So this is what I do on a day-to-day. And I also do coach leadership for women. One of my very sort of programs that I'm passionate about is a program called Leadership for Women. It's a coaching program. The program changed my life, right? The program changed my life. I had so many dreams that at some point I'd actually given up on. I had parked the idea of becoming a doctor one day. But when I did the Leadership for Women, the courage came back. I now had a plan. The goal was set. And I was able to complete my own doctorate in record time. In 3 years, I completed a doctorate that I paid for in the US. So that was also, something that, the Leadership for Women was able to give me in order to be able to believe in the abilities that I had, in order to believe in myself again, but in order to really utilize the resources that I had so that I could achieve my goals. So today's topic, what are we focusing on? We're focusing on claiming your strategic voice, how women leaders drive organizational change, right? So I think when we're talking about strategic voice, we're really talking about how do you use the information? How do you use your experience? How do you use the relationships that you have in order to influence decisions, but also in order to actually influence the achievement of your own personal goals. So it's very important, us being strategic as women, to be able to say, you know what, these are my goals, but the information I have or the information I need, the relationship that I need that are going to get me to the next level or get me to my goal is A, B, C, D. So how do you use the resources you have built over time, or the resource, or also identify what are the opportunities where you need to actually build, the resources, or even to put it together like a portfolio of evidence that can help you to influence decisions in the organizations you are in, whether it is at a team level, whether it is at an organizational level. How do you claim your strategic voice? The ability to influence decisions, the ability to be able to, for your ideas to be taken seriously when decisions are being made. One of the things that we find as women, as I've been coaching women for the longest time, one of the areas of challenge that I find with a lot of women is the lack of strategic influence. So you are in an organization, you have the position, you have the competence and the expertise, you're a talented individual, and yet it doesn't always translate into the decisions that are being made. It doesn't always translate into the decisions that are being made in an organization, right? So what are some of the common symptoms? How would you know that I lack strategic influence, that I need to build this? How would you know? Some of the symptoms that you might see, some of the symptoms include ideas dismissed or they are attributed to male colleagues in the organization. Okay, so if any of this is sounding like something that you've experienced, I would love to see your reaction in the chat box and say, yeah, that one, I can relate to that one. That resonates. Okay, so just type in the chat box and say, ideas dismissed, that resonates. I've seen that happen to me. Okay, so you can use the chat box. Okay, all right. Excluded from critical strategic conversations. So your role, as you can see it, as you assess, you do the assessment, you can see that, you know what, my role is critical in the conversation that's going on. But for some reason, you end up, you're not in that conversation. you end up having to receive the decisions that have been made on your behalf, on your behalf, and even impacting your own role without your contribution in it, Contributions consistently undervalued. Okay, your contributions are consistently not given the value that they deserve, for the impact that you're making, and then relegated to execution rather than strategy. So sometimes then you become the operational person, right? So the strategy is designed without your contribution. Now you are the person that is supposed to now execute. So you are more operational than really having your voice included when the strategy is actually formulated. But something to really take note of is that, these symptoms are not just about people in organizations that are bad, right? That don't want to value women, okay? Some of these issues, or the lack of strategic influence, or even people doing, what I've highlighted to say, undervaluing your contribution. It's got everything to do with the system, right? It's got everything to do with the system. So we have the unconscious bias in systems that says, oh, for the longest time, women stayed at home, men went to work, they brought the money, they were the breadwinners. But now things are changing. There's a lot of opportunity for women. Women are getting into those positions and those roles, but the bias hasn't quite gone away, right? The bias hasn't gone away. That's why sometimes you still need to continue to prove yourself and prove you're worthy, because people still have the prior conditioning, the prior training that says a woman, cannot make strategic decisions. We also even know sometimes, even when you look at it from a scriptural or religious perspective, where, a man is the head of the house. So we've always have this idea of who is supposed to be a leader. So we have, because of training, but also because of conditioning, but because of also what we see in our environment and social environment, we have this idea of who is actually supposed to be a leader, right? So we say the man is the house, and this is is the head of the house. So we still have these sort of preconditioning, pre-wired sort of conditioning that says a leader is supposed to be a person who looks like this. So when you get into a system that has already been primed, when you get into a system where we have already been trained, all of us even been trained to say a leader looks like this, there's already that unconscious bias, right? There is that unconscious bias and stereotyping that occurs as a result of the training we've received, okay? So also, as women, we then also sometimes, not even sometimes, a lot of the times, we lack the strategic positioning skills, right? We lack the strategic, how do I position myself? You hear a lot of women say, no, I don't want to get involved in the organizational politics. I'm just here to do my work. And you see a lot of people, a lot of women who are working very hard, very operational, and they are waiting for someone to come and notice and validate that they are doing well, instead of actually communicating their values and seeking opportunities that are strategic to be able to communicate the value of what they are doing. So again, the training, the conditioning, women, you don't speak often. You only speak when you've got nothing to say. You cannot actually blow your own horn. We hear a lot of this. So you cannot blow your own horn. So you don't actually communicate the value that you're contributing. Okay. So communication barriers and style differences, again, from the social conditioning, right? As women, there are things that we've been taught we can communicate. There are things that we've been taught we cannot communicate. And then limited power, access to power networks. Right. So you see, the gents during weekend, they'll be playing golf, they're exchanging ideas. Some of the decisions are made on the golf course, but us as women, we've got other responsibilities. It's weekend. What are you doing? You're making sure, the house is looking all right. You're making sure that you are organizing the next birthday party for your child. You are organizing the next sort of get together. So when we then, the multiple sort of responsibilities that we have, then sometimes take away from our ability to build those power networks, our ability to build those power networks. So these are some of the challenges that women face when they have to build, or that they have to overcome, to build their own strategic influence, I'm just interested in seeing what your response is. Ideas dismissed, pitched on a different platform. I love that. Contributions undervalued, excluded from, so we can relate to some of this, that it is actually happening. It is actually happening. Okay. All right, let's move on. So now that we know that these things are happening, right? They're happening. So we cannot continue to be victims, right? We have to take charge. We have to take it into our own hands to fix some of these things so that we can build our own strategic influence. We can build our own strategic influence. It's common for people to give up when you have been trying and then you give up, okay? And then what that does, it just makes the system stronger, right? It makes the system stronger. So we need to build up capacity and psychological strength in order for us to continue to build the necessary skill set that is going to help us to influence decision-making in organizations, decision-making in our society, decision-making in our families as women, okay? And the nice thing is that there are skill sets that we can build. So there are skill sets we can build. And we have identified 3 critical dimensions that when developed together, create a lasting foundation for lasting strategic influence, okay? So the first sort of critical dimension is the personal leadership. So as a female leader, you have to crystallize your own thinking so that you're clear about your vision, you're clear about your mission, right? Okay, you know exactly the value that you want to contribute. So personal leadership is where it starts. You have to start with the ability to create that internal clarity and confidence so that when ideas are dismissed, you then are not able to internalize it and think there's something wrong with you, but you realize that the system is like that, so it doesn't immediately burn you out or demotivate you or demoralize you, right? So you need to build that internal clarity and confidence. What is my value add? What is my mission? What is my unique contribution? And what is my leadership philosophy? And where do I get my power from? What is my source of power? Okay, and it is always important to be able to build an internal source of power, because again, as women, the way we've been socialized, we constantly are looking for external validation from others. We also want to be able to operate in groups, so the opinions of others matter than your opinion of yourself. And this then almost like, destabilize the internal stability that you need to be building in order for you to be able to be having that unique leadership philosophy. So you need to define, you need to develop that internal clarity. And the second one is the challenge of leadership, okay? So we also need to be able to understand what are some of the leadership skill sets that are important for us to be able to master, right? So we talk about strategic influence, but there's also a need to actually understand what strategic planning is. What is that about, okay? What are the organizational objectives? How is my role fitting into the organizational objectives? So that when I'm speaking in a meeting, when I'm making a contribution, I will be able to say the role that I'm doing, or the task that I'm doing, or the project that I'm working on. This is the dent. This is the impact that it's making on the strategic objectives, right? So you're able to keep a line of sight in your engagement with your team, in your engagement with your role, to be able to say, what are we actually targeting for? What are we heading for? What do we need to be achieving? So that you don't, a lot of the times people lose a line of sight because you're focusing on what you need to do. And so your head is buried in the sand, doing, but you're losing the sight of where we are going. And when you actually have a conversation, you're not able to demonstrate or even able to communicate the value of what you're doing based on the strategic direction of the organization. So be clear about strategic planning. What is my role? What is my project? What is my team? What is the impact that they are making on the strategic objectives? And being able to communicate that clearly. Okay, team empowerment, right? So if you're in a leadership position where you have a team, you want to be able to make sure that your team is developing skill sets that get you ahead as a team. Interestingly enough, I've worked a lot on team dynamics recently, and a lot of some of the team dynamics that I've worked on are team dynamics that are headed by women. And because of our conditioning, our prior conditioning, you often hear things like, oh, our manager is mothering us. But you also hear extremes of, oh, she's very aggressive. Remember, as we lead as women, we're coming into an environment that has been trained a certain way. So if you raise your voice or you're very assertive as a woman, there is also that, oh, she's too harsh or she's too aggressive. The same done by male counterparts would have a different impact, right? So we then find that a lot of the times, women leaders or female leaders struggle with their teams in terms of development, where they are on either just really moving around the two extremes on, how do I actually empower my team? How do I coach my team? A lot of the times it's a lot of instruction giving and not coaching, not empowering the team. So we're good at, because we're operational, we know how things are done. We then give people the instructions on how things are done instead of actually empowering, coaching the team to be independent rather than being dependent on us. So that's also, a challenge for most women, to be able to develop, to coach the team rather than really, telling the team. A lot of the times people are instructing and they think that they're empowering. And then the art of sharing power. How do you share power with your team? So you don't necessarily have to be the one running the show. How do you identify key people in your team that you are able to actually, share the power with, so that you can organize, you can actually elevate your organizational impact? And then around sharing the power, most women then struggle with delegation. So because we're operational, we want to be able to do everything all by ourselves. You want to do everything in the office, you get home, you want to do everything, you're going to get burnt out. That's for sure. And you will lose a line of sight because you're trying to do as many things as you can. So an area also of possible development to increase your strategic influence is the ability to actually delegate. And I love the word delegate because it means to empower. Right? Delegating is not letting go of work you don't want to do or you can't do because your schedule is busy. Delegation is about empowering people. It's about coaching people. It's about training people so that they can do this work as better as you can do it yourself, right? So that this will then clear your schedule, clear your energy, clear your psychological space in order to focus on strategic priorities for your team, in order to focus on strategic priorities for your team. And then communication and persuasion. Communication and persuasion. Women love to talk. Like we talk, we've got how many? Like 60,000 words a day. That's what they say. We talk a lot. So, but talking doesn't always translate to effective communication. So we can talk, but we might not necessarily land the message or land the outcome that we are expecting from people. So very important, communication, crafting your message that overcome barriers. You already know there are barriers of stereotype. There are barriers of biases, right? There are barriers of, oh, women talk a lot, but they don't add any value. So how do you craft your message knowing fully well that the system that you are operating in, or the system that you need to be able to rise above in terms of the way they've been trained, requires of you to overcome certain barriers. So become aware. What are the barriers in your own system, in your own organization? You already know what the biases and the barriers are, right? So you want to be able to then be strategic enough to be able to craft a message that will overcome barriers and position your ideas strategically to valuable key stakeholders, So this is important for us to be able to note that there are these three approaches that we can take in order to build our own strategic influence, right? So if you look at the personal leadership, you want to understand what your power sources are. And I mentioned this earlier, okay? What are your power sources, okay? So we often, as women, underutilize certain types of power. Okay, we underutilize certain types of power that can drive our own strategic influence. The first source of power is your expertise power. We always have so much knowledge. We've built knowledge over time, but we don't actually utilize the knowledge strategically, right? How is my knowledge? How is the information I have helping the organization to achieve its goal? And being able to communicate that. The connection power. So even though we are relational as women, we rarely use our relationships to help us to achieve goals or to influence decisions, right? To help us to garner support we need in order to influence decisions within the business space or even in our personal space, So we need to build relationship networks across organizational levels. So we now talk about a networked organization. So it's no longer just hierarchical, right? How are you building relationships across, top down, sideways, and even bottom? So you need to build your own connection pool, your own connection power, people, relationships that will help you to support you when you pitch an idea, right? When you pitch an idea, who are the people when you pitch an idea, they are going to support you? Often we don't use our relationships that way, right? We just use our relationships because we are natural, connectors, relators. We connect and relate about other things that are personal, but we don't actually use it strategically in order to achieve our goals that we want to achieve. And the personal power, cultivating your own presence and conviction in your ideas, right? We normally hear about imposter syndrome, self-doubt, lack of self-belief, low self-belief. So we need to cultivate that presence. We need to embody our ideas and be able to have that conviction that says, you know what, this is important, it matters. And remember this, ideas are accepted after the 6th time they're presented. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ideas are accepted after the 6th time they're presented. Now, if you're in the room, how many times have you pitched an idea? It didn't get the support you thought it would get first time. So you actually withheld your contribution. You actually withheld contributing again this idea. Let me hear in the chat. Are you there where you have contributed an idea? It didn't get the uptake that you thought it would get, but because you have been repeating the idea to yourself more than 6 times, right? So by the time you are pitched the idea, some people are hearing it for the first time, but psychologically, ideas are accepted after the 6th time they are presented. If you are in the room and you've pitched an idea once and you thought maybe people are not interested and you stopped, please give me that's me, I'm right here, I can relate to that. Let me hear that in the chat. Okay, have you done that where, an idea is presented by you, but it didn't get the uptake that you thought it would get, and then you actually stopped pitching the idea or you stopped sharing? Okay. Okay, I'm just checking in there. Yeah, guilty. Yes, I'm there. All right, there we are. Right, so ideas are accepted, guys, after the 6th time they're presented. So you don't give up on your idea, right? This is a psychological issue. It's not a personal issue. So sometimes we think, oh, people don't like to take my ideas, and we think, oh, it's about me, it's personal. No, it's a psychological issue. Ideas are accepted after the 6th time they presented. So you need to be willing to pitch your ideas in different rooms. And that's why you need to build the strategic relationships so that when you get into that meeting, some of the people are not hearing this idea for the first time. You've had a coffee with them, so they understand what your idea is about, right? You've already tried to, we've always heard that, people get into a meeting, decisions have already been made because people had coffee chats. You're busy getting the support you need before you actually get into the meeting, right? Before you get into the meeting. So very important that, we get there and we already have pitched, the idea to several people. So if 6 people already can support you, remember, ideas are accepted after the 6th time they're presented. So you present it to that person, then you've got a buy-in. You present it to that next person, they have a buy-in. And when you get into the meeting, you already have garnered the support that you need. Yeah. And Nomvula, what did you say? Sometimes you do not have the craft to pitch your ideas, and then others, often men, take them and present them as theirs. Wow, that's interesting, right? Very, very interesting. It happens. It happens. But I think it's also about when we are having these conversations, how are we able to sort of set the boundaries that are necessary to protect our own ideas? But sometimes I'm always also like, we can't overly protect people taking ideas and making them their own, right? If they can take the idea and run with it, it's better than an idea that is kept inside of me. So that's me. If I can share with you my idea and you can run with it and we can get the impact we need, I'm okay. But I know that sometimes we still need to get those ideas attributed to us because it's important, because then it also influences, it also impacts your strategic influence. Very important. Okay. So fear of rejection after the 2nd time, I can see that. So you see the emotional, the emotional aspect is actually coming in. The psychological aspect is coming in. So it's also this about training your nervous system to say, not all rejection of ideas is a rejection of you as a person. Right. So ideas may be rejected, but it doesn't mean that you are a bad person. You don't have ideas that are worthwhile, but it's understanding. And that's why we need to work on building the strategic influence. That's why we need to work on it, because otherwise we default exactly to our fear of rejection. So we stop, right? It's our brain wiring. It's our, emotional pattern to, we would rather, avoid than, being rejected. So it's identifying those patterns and being able to come up with a plan to say, how do I deal with this challenge that I have? So a clear personal leadership philosophy that serves as a North Star for strategic decisions helps others to understand your consistent approach to leadership challenges. And I think also one thing that is coming to my mind right now is the more you speak about something, when you've got a philosophy that you follow, people will begin to attribute certain things to you. So even if someone takes your idea, the more you speak about your philosophy, the more you speak about ideas that matter to you, people will begin to attribute. So spaced repetition will begin to attribute certain ideas to you because of the philosophy that you carry. And this is why the spaced repetition is important, or why it matters. Okay, so I think that is so personal leadership action. What can you do? Identify your unique value. So conduct a personal SWOT analysis, focusing specifically on strategic strengths that differentiate you from your peers. What makes you different from your peers? Document specific instances where your contributions created organizational value. 2, articulate your leadership philosophy. Draft a personal mission statement that captures your core value, your vision, your contribution. What does your work contribute? What difference is your work making? Test and refine with trusted colleagues, okay? And this is what we do in our 10-week leadership for women coaching. When women walk away from our 10-week leadership coaching, they are clear about what their philosophy and their mission is. They are very, very clear. This is what we do. But I'm giving you these ideas, but sometimes it takes a journey. It takes a transformational process. It takes injection and input of new ideas in order for you to be able to craft that philosophy clearly and articulate it confidently. Okay, so build your own power inventory, map your current sources of power and influence, identify gaps, build and particularly in connection power. How can you use your connections to achieve strategic goals that you may have? Okay, and so you can actually develop a targeted plan. Who do you need to have a coffee with this week just to really build a relationship, to share with them what your philosophy is, why it matters? The next is the challenge of leadership. Okay, so we talked about strategic planning. So connect team objectives to organizational priorities, identify key performance indicators that matter to executives. You can be very busy, but if you're doing what your executive is not looking at, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You will still be seen as a person who's not performing. So identify what matters for your executive, what matters for your line manager, what is important, what do they want to see? So identify that so that when you're busy, you can actually contribute, but you also can communicate to say, I'm contributing towards this. Anticipate future challenges and opportunities. So instead of going and complaining about what's not going right, be a person who has developed that skill set to be able to look at what can actually happen in future and be able to bring that in conversation in terms of challenges, rather than just going to say, this is happening as a reactionary. You need to be more proactive in offering and proffering solutions. Okay, team empowerment, develop team, create role clarity and maximize team strength, establish decision-making frameworks that balance autonomy with alignment. So we don't need to micromanage, we don't need to make all the decisions. So we need that balance in our teams where the team has autonomy. They can still make some decisions. They feel like they can make some decisions, but they're still aligned to where we are going. So you want to be able to, how do we check in? So sometimes it's about giving someone a goal and then checking in with them weekly to be able to see, where are we? Are we still aligned? Are we still going in the direction that we want? But you're giving them the leeway to actually do the work rather than constantly monitoring or even doing the work yourself. I've seen a lot of this with women. You would delegate something and take it and start to do it again afresh. So very important that. Okay, diverse capabilities that expand your team's impact. Okay, so a diverse team is very, very important. And remember, diversity is not just about, race. It's now we have, we have generations. We also have background stories. So the stories that we bring to a team. So a lot of the times people don't get time to talk about their personal stories so that they can explore the diversity in the stories, but they can also connect. I always say we are the same in essence, but we're different in existence. And our similarities can be extracted when we actually share our personal stories, okay? And then sharing power, recognize and promote team contributions. So one of the things that we find a lot in organizations is the idea of people not celebrating wins enough or celebrating each other enough. Okay, so as a leader, female leader, acknowledge someone who's doing well, right? And it doesn't have to be maybe in a team. It can even be, on social media. Acknowledge someone who's doing well, who's making contributions. Okay, what does that do? It just, because a lot of the times we struggle to celebrate ourselves. We do so much, we struggle to celebrate ourselves. So we actually need to practice celebration. We actually need to practice recognizing, other people's contributions and not seeing them as a threat to us, and not seeing them as a competition, and not seeing them as I'm far behind, right? It's not a competition. We're not comparing. You're just acknowledging the contribution that is being made by your team members or by your colleagues, right? Very important. And that can increase your own influence and impact. Create visibility opportunities for team members. Very important. How do you share your power? Build a reputation as a leader who develop others. Okay. Build a reputation as a leader who develops other people. And then the last is communication and persuasion. How do you structure your ideas to emphasize strategic relevance, right? And business impact rather than implementation details. So sometimes we're bogged down in, I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. But why were you doing it? Why were you doing all of that? Okay. So we need to be able to frame it to, I did this, and this was the impact that it had on this goal or strategic objective, right? So we need to really think about, what is the impact of what I'm doing right now? Okay, what is the impact of what I'm doing? Okay, and then master vocal presence. I think very important, body language. This is, how do you deliver your message? Okay, it's easy to get triggered. Sometimes people can, to the earlier point we had earlier on, someone can undervalue or dismiss your ideas. How do you compose yourself and continue to pitch? How do you compose yourself and continue to share the idea? Because it's easy to get very irate. It's easy to get frustrated. I'm coaching a particular female leader in one of the organizations, and she works with a team of dominantly white males, and she's Black. And so she feels that the way they are not taking ideas, she even thinks it's bullying. But we are to actually have a conversation and say, why are you expecting them to take your ideas at first pitch? But also remember, these people have been in the organization for so long. They are trained and conditioned. There are certain things that they know. You are new, you're bringing new ideas. You're going to face resistance. That's a given, right? So, but for her, it will frustrate her. She will take days without recovery. And I'm like, resilience is the ability to bounce back quicker, recover from those emotional setbacks. Also look at it more than as a systemic issue rather than a personal issue, so that you can recover quicker, so that you can compose yourself. So imagine when you're throwing tantrum, and I had a conversation with her, even I think yesterday, when I was saying, when you're busy throwing a tantrum, not even a tantrum, I know it's valid, it's frustrating, you feel angry because your ideas are being dismissed. You start even to think about, maybe, oh, it's because I'm a Black woman. You start to think all these other thoughts that are not relevant, but the idea is, it's systemic. People will dismiss the ideas, they have their own biases. You need to then compose yourself, bounce back quicker, experience the frustration, it's normal, it's human, but bounce back quicker and play the game. Bounce back quicker and get back in the game. Because if you're going to take 2 weeks where you're trying to recover, the business is not waiting, people are not waiting, you're missing opportunities for influence, because people are not going to wait for you to recover from your emotional experience about the event. So how do you manage? Self-regulation becomes very critical, so that you can be able to manage your delivery techniques, right? And then overcoming barriers. How do you navigate, interruptions, attribution theft? To your point earlier on, Nomvula, how do you, so attribution theft, when people are attributing to something, or someone owns this idea, how do you navigate that? How do you bring that conversation to say, you know what, this is an idea that we had when we spoke about ABCD, right? So how do you navigate that conversation and other common challenges that diminish women's voices? So you need to be able to understand that these are there. How do I build myself, my capacity, in order to be able to overcome these things? Okay, so I think very important, strategic communication tactics. Lead with strategic headlines. Begin your recommendation or conclusion by supporting points. Replace I think or I believe with the data indicates, our analysis show, right? Because, because of the stereotypes and because of the biases, who cares about what you think? Who cares about what your belief is? Okay, but you cannot argue against data. You cannot argue against data. So present the data. Our data shows, right? Our analysis shows. I was coaching another particular female leader in one of the minings. She's a mining manager. And she started doing this. And she started to see that even she's being invited to go and sit in the board meetings because she's no longer saying, I think, she's using data, right? And people cannot argue. So they're going through a section 189 and they were going to be retrenching a whole entire team. She did data analysis to say, our data shows that my team has contributed this. My team is needed because of this. She just didn't say, please don't fire my team. She presented data. She presented useful analysis for the board to look at, and that helped her idea to sail through, where her entire team has not been affected by Section 189. Okay, all right. Frame in business impact. Connect your ideas directly to organizational priorities using specific metrics and outcomes. Quantify benefits whenever possible and align with executive level concerns. Okay, leverage strategic storytelling. Okay, use conscious, compelling narratives that illustrate the problem, solution, outcome. Include specific examples that demonstrate strategic thinking and business acumen. Building strategic alliances. Pre-align with key stakeholders before meetings. Create amplification partnerships where colleagues can reinforce and credit your ideas, making them harder to dismiss or appropriate. So this, again, building the strategic relationships so that you can be able to get the support that you need. Okay, all right. So building it all together, when developed together, these three pillars are powerful foundation for lasting strategic influence. So your personal clarity feeds into how you lead teams. When you're not clear about yourself, it's difficult to lead a team, which enhances your communication impact, further strengthening your leadership presence. So an integrated approach helps you to break down the barriers that the historically limited women's strategic influence and voice, allowing you valuable perspectives to shape the organizational direction. Okay, so what is the impact of your strategic influence when you do it? Okay, so when we take through leaders, through our Leadership for Women transformational program, we see 80% leadership confidence. Okay, and we also see 3.2 career advancements, promotions. So leaders that were GMs, they are now CEOs. We've seen people progress. People that were stuck in their career, they're able to make either lateral moves or upward, or moves, or even move into other organizations. And 91% strategic impact. So they report being able to successfully implement strategic initiatives that were previously blocked. So very important. Yes, we've shared the three pillars, but remember, you are dealing with the preconditioning. You're dealing with the wiring, not only of yourself, but also of the system that you're navigating. So sometimes it requires a transformative process in order to really face those conditioning processes and decondition and recondition yourself so that you can get to the next level of your own potential. You can get to the next level of your own potential. Yeah. So with that, I am going to ask for any questions on what I've shared. So this is what we needed to share today on building your own strategic influence as a leader. Building your own strategic influence as a leader. So what are your thoughts? What resonated with you? What are the questions you may have? And we only have 5 minutes to take those minutes, the question, 5 minutes, and we will be done. Our weekly webinar is 45, not weekly, monthly webinar. So we meet monthly and it's 45 minutes. So we only have 5 minutes left. So I will just pause here and see what your reactions have been to this content, but also your thoughts, but also questions that you may have. I'm just really looking at the chat box to see if there's any questions that I might take. Okay, there are those who are always ready to sideline others. Then they brought back by those they are in favor of. Yeah, so that's why you need to build your own strategic team. You need to build your own strategic relationships, right? Okay, so if you don't have the relationship, don't think the person you don't have a relationship with will support you because your idea is valid or important. People support people that they have a relationship with. Unfortunately, it's like that. So we need to build those strategic relationships. Okay, victim of stolen ideas, but kept giving more. Okay, all right. Some women have not developed the confidence and sophistication to present their ideas in compelling ways. That leaves the space for others to steal. Exactly, right? So someone can actually steal your idea because the confidence you presented with it, then, people didn't take it serious. So vital for us women to empower ourselves as leaders, because we have so much value to add, and sometimes small adjustments can make the biggest difference. Certainly, Candice, I agree with you. I agree. Those small adjustments that we need to be making, but also facing that pre-wiring, preconditioning, so that we can actually grow and become more effective in our leadership capability. Oh my goodness, you're such a, thanks, Nokuthula. Thank you, Nokuthula. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, all right, questions? I'm not seeing any questions. If you don't have any questions, what is your response to this? Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. How do you build relationships with women?
Sorry to interrupt. A question from Tatu. Just have a look at the, shall I read it out?
Yeah, please, thank you.
I've just lost it a sec. Shucks. Tatu, do you want to unmute yourself and just pose the question? Okay, maybe I was seeing things. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Tamsin.
Oh, thank you. Thank you and good morning. Good morning. Am I audible?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for the beautiful presentation. My question was, you have experienced bullying from a colleague in the past, and it has affected your relationship. How do you then go forward with rebuilding a relationship with somebody who has bullied you in the past? Thank you.
So I think my interest would be, so you've been bullied. Did you address that? Or it hasn't been addressed? Because I think maybe that's the starting point. What conversation do you need to have? So obviously there is healing and forgiveness that needs to happen. There's also maybe the person will admit that they did that, maybe they might not admit. So there's a whole lot of what happened. Did they acknowledge that they bullied you? Is it something that you just experienced? Did you have a conversation to try and redress it? Because then I think that's the starting point. That conversation would then determine whether you need to still build the relationship or you can just forgive each other and move on in different directions. Okay, so I think the key thing is, have you had a conversation? Have you had intervention or mediation, maybe if it's needed, for you to be able to have that conversation where the person either takes ownership or denies? You know, most bullies deny that they've done it. And maybe it was a question of intention versus impact. So a lot of us, we mean well, but we impact terribly. Right? We mean well and we impact terribly. And some of the times it's the emotional patterns that we bring that we are also unaware of, that you can actually come across to someone very strongly than your intent, and you can harm them, but without the intention of actually being harming. So I think, Tato, it's exploring that to say, where's the relationship at now? What have you done after the bullying? Do you need to have that conversation? Has the forgiveness happened? The healing happened? That will determine whether you can still build the relationship with that person or not.
Mavis, we promised the audience 45 minutes. So thank you very much, everyone. But may I ask you, can we just stay on a few minutes, because there's still a few interesting questions. If you've got value from the session, we really appreciate it. Your time and attention. We'll be sending you details of the recording. But if you feel like you just want to stay on for one or two questions, the answers to one or two questions, you're quite welcome. If not, thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to being in touch with you one day. Is that all right, Mavis?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So Onka Betse Mpako writes, some of these do not come naturally to women due to confidence. How would you advise one on steps to embed these strategies over time?
Right. So I think it's about setting the goals, right? So you need to be able to start those developmental goals and say, what is the goal I want to develop? And when you talk about, for example, maybe communication, what do you want to work on? So remember, there were action items that we presented earlier on. But I think it's also important to be able to, so coaching becomes very important here, because then you have a mirror, but you also have someone who's holding you accountable, and you're able to measure from the beginning where you are and where you are at the end. You've got August, maybe you're working on something until December, but if you are only doing it by yourself, how would you measure? How would you get feedback? How would you maintain consistency? So you need accountability. So sometimes getting a coach becomes very critical to accelerate the development of those competencies. Because when we are doing it on our own, sometimes we do it and then we pause, and then we, what life is happening alongside your development. So I think the critical thing is get yourself a coach and get into the process. And one of the things that we also know, women want to change actions without changing the underlying beliefs. There's a reason why you're behaving the way you're behaving. There's a belief. But if you don't unearth that belief and try to change the action change will not be sustainable, or behavior change will not be sustainable. So it's also important to get into a transformative process that also highlights or help you to reflect on some of these things like your beliefs, your attitudes, the habits that you currently have, and help you to formulate new habits, but also shape new attitudes.
Mavis, I'll make this the last one. Tamsin Jardine writes, what does a successful high-level pitch look like? She says she would love to see some practical examples, maybe next time round.
Yeah, maybe next time round, or you can also drop me an email, Tasmin, because it's contextual, right? Okay, so I think it's contextual. So I think it's important that we craft it based on the context. So maybe drop me an email when you receive our what is it called? Our recording. Maybe you and I can have a separate conversation around that. And maybe in future, we can also incorporate it as part of the conversation to bring those examples.
Mavis, can we have the last question, if you don't mind, please? Machepo Molomo writes, women are often labeled as emotional when they raise issues. How does one overcome that without becoming or being labeled?
Okay, all right. So you already know that's a bias and stereotype you need to actually overcome. So the idea of this building the communication, pillar, the communication influence, your body language, the voice, the tone, all those things really matter. When you get triggered, do you remain composed, right? Do you remain composed? But also neutralizing emotions is presenting data. So when you've got data, you are unlikely to be emotional on things that you can see to say, reiterating what the data said, reiterating what the analysis says. So it helps you to maintain composure so that it's not just about what you think and your ideas and your opinions, that you feel like there's a direct attack towards you as an individual. So I think it's really the self-regulation, and self-awareness becomes critical here. So I think we could do a whole session on the self-regulation and emotional intelligence for women leaders. Okay, we can consider that in the next session. So I think the ability to manage your emotions, very critical, very, very critical. Because yes, people will provoke you and trigger you. And the moment you raise your voice, as often happens, we lose it.
Okay. Thanks, Mavis. With that, we're gonna as I've often said to you, as one of the few male attendees of your workshops, man, there's some real good value. Thank you, everyone, for the kind comments, and we look forward to being in touch with you as time goes by. Certainly, Mavis invites your participation, and we'll send you details, and let's see where the journey takes us. Thanks, Mavis. Thanks, people.
Thanks, Tony, and thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend. Thank you so much.